I'm going to discuss one of the biggest headaches that we encounter and one of the costliest mishaps that we encounter: reel and bed knife damage. And specifically, I'm going to discuss what I call leading end damage, which is by far the most common type of damage that we come across. So, the end of the reel where the blade is going to pass the bed knife first is the leading end. So this reel's rotating forward like that. So this is the leading end. Vast majority of cutting units, the leading end is on the operator's right hand side. Some are on the left, but most of them are on the right nowadays. One thing that can happen is bent or broken reel blades. Okay, here's a broken one. We got a chunk missing out of the leading end of this reel blade. Years ago, you used to see a lot of these blades on the leading end would be bent back this way, and nowadays, usually when you have damage, you will see a chunk missing instead of a bend, and that is because the steel that manufacturers are using in their heat treatment results in a harder reel blade than years ago. And as a general rule, when it comes to steel, harder means it will stay sharp longer, but it's also more brittle, more susceptible to breaking. So that's what we have here. But the most costly part of the issue for us is damaged bed knives. And usually this damage, whether it's to the reel blade or to the bed knife, is the result of what I call a proud object. And that's usually a sprinkler head that is slightly above the ground and or not parallel and flush with the ground. And when this cutting unit rides over the top of one of those proud objects, the weight of the cutting unit is going to, and the momentum of the cutting unit is going to drop down. And if that cutting unit drops down so that the leading end of the cutting unit drops down onto that proud object, the proud object is going to push up on the leading end of the bed knife. And when that happens, a lot of times the leading end of the bed knife will get pushed up in between the reel blades, and one of these blades is going to come around and catch that leading end that's being pushed up, and then all hell's going to break loose. So some of the factors that contribute to this are the weight of the cutting unit and the momentum as it's passing over that proud object. In other words, the speed. The strength of the bed knife or the thickness of the bed knife is also a factor. whether that bed knife has a chamfer, or some people call it a dub, or a lead-in. That is a factor. And here is an example of, I call it a chamfer. So the leading end of this bed knife is chamfered. The rake angle of the reel is a big factor, because as you can see, this reel has a probably 10 to 15 degree rake angle. That's the angle of the blade in relation to a radii, I guess you could call it. You know, a line that goes from the center of the reel axis to the outside. So this angle right here, that's probably a positive 12 degree angle or something like that. So the more rake angle you have, the more potential that you have for damage. And that's because the more angle that you have, if your bed knife gets pushed up in there, and if your bed knife is thick enough, then the larger this rake angle, the more it's going to get pushed out of the quote-unquote circle of the reel. So the farther it is going to get bent out. If you know, a lot of reels, there's a lot of fairway reels that do not have a rake angle, or have a 0 degree rake angle. So that would mean that those are also called radial reels. So the reel blade has a 0 degree angle, so it's much less likely to, if a thick bed knife catches a radial reel blade, it is not going to push it out, or at least it won't push it out as much. Another big factor is the hardness of the bed knife and whether or not it has an insert. Some bed knives, the entire bed knife is harder than the typical bed knives from years ago. Some bed knives have an insert, so it's brazed on. Those inserts are very hard and very brittle. So sometimes those inserts will just break off and become detached from the bed knife. Sometimes I have seen a bed knife that the entire bed knife was hard, a big chunk be taken out of the bed knife, just like what we have right here. I've also seen the front edge of bed knives get sheared off. This is an entire front edge of a bed knife. In other words, this front lip right here. That's what that is. Okay, and like I said, the one of the big headaches that this type of damage presents is not only just the labor, not only the cost of replacing that one bed knife and the labor involved in replacing that bed knife and grinding that bed knife, but the decision has to be made by the technician or someone. Is are you going to replace all of the bed knives on that triplex or that fairway mower or that fleet of walkers? Or are you going to just replace the one damaged bed knife and then grind it down to try to match the geometry of the other bed knives? Or are you just going to replace that bed knife and not try to match the geometry? Those can be some expensive options. You know, if you're paying over $100 for a bed knife, and let's say all 5 of your knives on your fairway mower are halfway worn down, so somebody's got to make a tough decision. Are you going to replace all 5 bed knives so that all the geometry is the same? Or are you going to regrind all 5 of those bed knives, or the 4 that remain, and then grind the new one down to match the other 4? So the cost of this type of damage can just be enormous. So what do we do about this to prevent or remedy this type of damage? Well, the most obvious is to eliminate the proud objects. So if your sprinkler head or valve box, or you got a root, is proud of the surface of the ground, you obviously need to remedy that by cutting the root out, or leveling the valve box or sprinkler head. Reduced momentum can help. In other words, if the operator slows down, that could help. One of the smartest moves, in my opinion, is to have a spare set of bed bars or shoes, if you want to call it that, and bed knife assemblies, already ground and ready to go. That is one of the best moves, I think, that a technician can make, regardless of if we're trying to deal with bed knife damage or just your normal routine. That's one of the best moves that you can make, in my opinion. One of the best investments that you can make is a spare set of bed bars and bed knife assemblies. That way, if you do have a bed knife that's damaged, you can swap out those bed bar, bed knife assemblies pretty quickly. You may not even need to do any spin grinding, and all of your cutting units will have the same geometry. And then you can take your time and replace that one bed knife and grind it down to match the other 4. Or if all of those bed knives are pretty much close to the end of their life, then that would be a good time to replace all of those bed knives. I'm going to have some videos coming up pretty soon that you will want to see, and I've got a couple of gadgets that I will be unveiling pretty soon. So if you want to see those when they come out, which I recommend, subscribe and you will get notified of those videos as soon as they come out.